Welcome back to Rain Labs laboratory here in the frozen tundra of North Norfolk. Today we're looking at the MOTU Track 16. It's a desktop unit, big fat knob on the front, as is the style these days. So we're going to plug it in, try it out and see how it goes. The single knob desktop form factor is a bit trendy at the moment, and the unimaginatively named Track 16 hopes to rub pro quality shoulders with the likes of the RME Babyface and the Focusrite Forte. MOTU have a reputation for high quality no nonsense approach, but are often overlooked because they sometimes lack a little of the razzmatazz of their competitors, which is a shame because all their interfaces work really very well, so when they introduce something new and different to their usual focus, it's definitely worth paying attention, especially when it's this gorgeous. Personally, I've had it with these 1U audio interfaces, all those fiddly knobs and buttons. I just don't have the patience, so I'm increasingly attracted to something that's a bit more desktop friendly. The Track 16 is just that. Out of the box it's dark and smooth and very cold to the touch. In the centre you can't miss the shiny silver knob like the one you'd find on your dad's hi-fi. It turns easily, continuously, with a light sort of clicking action. I see, that's what it should be called. Mark of the Unicorn's Knob of Eternity. Far, far better. Anyway, back to the box. Above the knob are 4 pairs of 7-segment LEDs labelled mic in, guitar in, line in and main out. Beneath the knob are 2 rows of buttons and a couple of mystery LEDs. The top row of buttons appears to select which input and the bottom row selects which output, along with a power button. On the front edge you have a single guitar input, line input 3 and 4 on mini jack, presumably for an iPod or something, and 2 headphone outputs. On the back you've got optical in and out, USB and Firewire sockets, and then a 25-pin D connector for an enormous loom of cables for the additional I/O. The Breakout cable is huge. It's about 1 metre long and 1 inch thick. It's heavy, and when plumbed in it's likely to pull the unit off the table. The Babyface suffers from a similar problem, but the Track 16 is actually weightier and has these non-slip feet, so it feels much more secure than the Babyface. The cable was initially very annoying, and I started writing about how annoying the annoying cable was. But when I came to think about it, what are the alternatives? You have your rack units, which are in a rack with cables out the back and the fiddly knobs. You can have a purely desktop unit that trails cables all over your desk and take up as much space as perhaps a mixer, or you could restrict the number of I/O like the Focusrite Forte. So moving the I/O away on a single cable like the Track 16 is actually quite a good way of keeping your desktop clear. MOTU also offer an I/O box to have on the end rather than a load of loose connectors, which I thought was brilliant, but now I'm not so sure that it's important, because if you're actually going to use it, you're probably just going to secure the cables away anyway. I think the desire for the Track 16 to be mobile can cloud what MOTU have done here, and I imagine that some reviewers would mark them down for the cable when actually I can't see a better solution. However, if they'd put a mic input and the power socket on the desktop unit, then that would have enabled you to run it without the loom, making it the best of both worlds. The connections on the cable consist of 2 mic inputs, a second guitar input, line in and out, main out, MIDI in and out. So that gives you 8 analog inputs and 8 outputs, and with 8 channels of ADAT in and out, you get the rubbish name Track 16. Bet it took them hours to come up with that one. The Track 16 can run via USB or Firewire, however it can only be bus powered by Firewire. So if you're running USB, you'll need to use the included power supply. Well, lots of interfaces require this, so it's no biggie, until you realise that the power supply connects via the Breakout cable. This means that if you want to run on a USB-only laptop, then you'll need the power supply and the unwieldy Breakout cable. Not ideal. Right, let's slap it on the desk, plug it all in and see what occurs. Installation was a breeze. Once connected, you press power button, all the LEDs do a bit of a dance and it's ready to go. All the buttons are illuminated and in a few seconds I've got music coming out of Windows Media Player out of the main outputs. The big knob acts as a volume control, all the meters light up. Sweet. For some reason the CueMixFX was completely unexpected. I had missed the fact that the Track 16 contains a DSP chip and runs a bunch of EQ, dynamics and reverb effects. The software looks really, really good. It's clear and intuitive, except for the reverb, which I couldn't quite work out at first. And it has a lot of interesting things like controller options, which include the Touch OSC on the iPad. Let's get into the CueMix in a bit more detail. You have pages on input, mixes, submixes if you like, outputs. You've got EQ, dynamics and reverb. Let's see how that works together. I'll plug in my guitar into the guitar input on the front, select guitar on here, and then I can I can use my knob to trim the input. See the input gain is on here. And also output metering. Let's do this bit one at a time. So we've got we're on inputs at the moment. Got our focus is on the guitar one input, so that this over here is going to be displaying stuff on the guitar side. You've got mono or stereo, it's only a mono input. Your trim knob, which is the same as your silver knob. You've then got your DSP section. You've got EQ, which I can turn on here, and you've got a bigger display on the right. You can move all that sort of stuff around. There's tons of it. You've got shelving and low pass, high pass filters. Very, very good. Dynamics is the same. It's there, automatically there, straight away. Very responsive. Then you've got the reverb. You do have a send for reverb, but you've also got reverb on the master output as well, so you can switch and swap between those. And very luckily, you also have a guitar tuner, because this keeps going out of tune because it's blooming cold in here. Alongside the tuner, you've got FFT analysis, Fourier transform type analysis. You've got oscilloscope. You've got XY plot, phase, blah blah blah. That's all there. Similarly, on the EQ side, you can also show different things like a spectrogram. Very, very nice. Then on the mixes side, you can set up like a submix on everything before routing to the outputs, main analog and phones. Very comprehensive. It's a nice piece of kit. But it's not only that. We also have control from my iPad, which is just extraordinary. Just to give you a quick look, so I've got mixer control on the inputs, select inputs over here. I've got my trim control. I've even got metering. I can switch to EQ. And all that jazz. So absolutely everything is controllable from the natty little iPad. What's it? I mean, how extraordinary is that? So, and it's wireless as well. It's not connected to anything other than the wireless network. So you could have this, for instance, in your mic booth, and you can control your gain and inputs and reverb levels and all that sort of stuff, being miles away from the computer. Which is just simply fabulous. I mean, just to see the different bits, inputs, outputs, dynamics, EQ, reverb, mixes, it's all there, all multi-touch. Just simply fantastic, and it's all completely mirroring what's going on screen. The only thing it doesn't do, it doesn't flick between pages on the PC. So if I click on inputs here, it doesn't go to inputs on there. If I click on outputs, it doesn't change to outputs on there. But other than that, flipping ace that is.
The only slight snag I found was that there was a lack of presets for the effects, or there was no way to be able to save your own settings except for saving the whole CueMix. Otherwise, it's a lovely bit of software. Every time I run these performance tests, I feel that getting any real comparative data to accurately rate it alongside other interfaces is really very tricky. However, I persevere, I share my results, and I do my best to interpret them helpfully. You may get different results, so please use my comments as a guide rather than some kind of scientific fact. So, testing at 44.1 and 96K on a dual-core Windows 7 Livebook and Cubase 6.
I found that reported buffer sizes and performance were somewhere between an RME Babyface and the Native Instruments Complete Audio 6. At 96K, the Babyface gives a round-trip latency of 7 milliseconds at 256 samples. The MOTU gives a round-trip latency of 9 milliseconds. The Complete Audio 6, 12 milliseconds. So at that buffer size, the MOTU matched the performance of the Babyface, but it has a couple of milliseconds more latency. The Complete Audio 6 manages about 15% more than the MOTU, for instance achieving 512 note polyphony with Spectre as opposed to 464 on the MOTU, but it has 5 milliseconds more latency to play with. So do you see how difficult it is to make an accurate comparison? What I can say is that the Track 16 can achieve some decent performance figures at surprisingly low latency, lower than what interfaces such as the Complete Audio 6, Focusrite Scarlett or Akai EIE Pro can go to. Moving then to a desktop Nimbus Core i7, Windows 8 and Cubase 7. I was able to compare it directly to the Steinberg UR28M. Again, it's imprecise because they don't produce the same latency figures. At 128 samples, the MOTU was able to get down to 5 milliseconds, whereas the UR28M could only manage 8 milliseconds. At that level in our Spectre test, the MOTU achieved 55 instances compared to the UR28M's 64 instances. It's no surprise that the UR28M was able to do more because it had more latency to play with. So when you even up the actual latency figures, the MOTU fares pretty well. But do these figures add up? What about secret squirrel hidden buffers? Well, the only way to really know if an interface is telling the truth is by comparing an audio signal that goes through the interface with one that doesn't. I know people have got into using the Oblique Audio's round-trip latency utility, but I like to do things a bit old school. I like to know what the signal's doing and witness it moving through the gear in an expected way. Right, so here in the mess of my studio is we're going to demonstrate how you test round-trip latency in a real way using audio signals and stuff like that. We might have to speed this along a little bit. So to start off, you need a sound source, like a synth, which is going to give a good pure noise. We're going to send half of the stereo output from that into our test interface, which is the Track 16, which will then go through Cubase, monitored through Cubase, back out again of the Track 16, and into our interface on the computer, which is the UR28M. At the same time, the other side from the synth will go directly into the UR28M. So then in our recording software, which in this case is SoundForge, that will record both these signals at the same time, but one will be offset against the other because of the amount of time it's taken to go through Cubase. Yeah? Okay. So this is how we set it up. We take an output from the synth, one side, put there, like so, and then this is going to go into our Track 16, into the impossibly big loom cable. Okay, this is the other end of that. We're going to find an input on here, line in, right, that'll do. There's a signal coming in. Yes, there is. Now I need signal coming out of there. Plug that into main out. And the other end of that cable is going to go into our interface over here. So it goes in there like so. So there we're getting monitoring in Cubase through the Track 16 into the UR28M. Now if I turn off monitoring in Cubase, that sound goes away. Turn it back on, sound comes back. So we know that the signal is going through Cubase. We're not getting any direct monitoring, it's going through Cubase, which is what we need. So the other end of our synth needs to go directly into the what's it? So now I've got stereo signal going in. And we should be able to see this in SoundForge. Okay, so all we need to do is do some recording of that and we'll be able to compare it side by side. So let's go. So there, the difference between the two signals is our latency. So that is the difference between going through software and going direct. Real-time latency, folks. So using the Steinberg UR28M as a comparison, I measured at 96K and 256 samples. The reported round-trip latency of the Steinberg in Cubase is 13.354 milliseconds. You have to add up the in and out figure in the device's setup window. When measured in SoundForge, the actual real-time latency is 13.696. So the UR28M is actually pretty honest. Next we plugged in the Track 16 and Cubase reports a much lower round-trip latency of 9.167. When measured in SoundForge, this becomes 10.476, so that's about a 14% increase. Looking at the lowest latency figures when at 96K and 128 samples, Cubase gives a round-trip latency of 5.167. In SoundForge we get 6.530, which is a 25% increase. Does that make it good or bad? Well, it means the performance is around what we've come to expect from most USB interfaces. The UR28M is average. The Complete Audio 6 is better than most. The Babyface is one of the best. So the Track 16 is in the arena of the average. However, what is a bit more remarkable is how it's able to achieve this performance at quite a low latency. Lower than most, although the RME still takes the cake on that one. One note with Windows 8 is that I did have some trouble getting it to work. It would not give any playback when plugged into a USB 2 socket, even though it appeared to be installed. Using the same socket as the UR28M didn't work either. Switch into USB 3 and everything suddenly came to life. During testing, everything was fine until you swapped buffer sizes or sample rates, at which point the MOTU would seem to struggle with the idea and occasionally lock up. Saw no problems at all on Windows 7, so maybe there's something that needs to be looked at there, MOTU. With the low latency figures, the Track 16 feels very pokey in Cubase. The response is tight and pleasurable and just works as it should. Turn off the monitoring in the CueMix and you can monitor through Cubase with no discernible lag or delay. Excellent stuff. The desktop form factor makes it very easy to use and see what's going on. The meters are good and give a clear indication of level and possible distortion. The mystery LEDs on the unit are V for phantom power, obviously, and P for pad. The buttons make it a breeze to select and control inputs, and they feel good, look good, and the whole unit has a professional feel and finish to it. I often get asked to mention the converters and sound quality, and I find that's a difficult thing to really quantify. Unless you have a setup where you can A and B different sound sources and run analysis, then all you've got is your ears and unhelpful words like, "It sounds great." In my opinion, the sound quality is reflected in the price of the interface, so this is going to be a lot better than most. What I can tell you is that there was no discernible hiss or bleed into other channels, there was plenty of volume, and the knob made for very smooth volume changes. Was there anything I didn't like? Well, the one knob to rule them all feature can be a bit limiting, and I would sometimes get lost in terms of what it was I was actually controlling, and deep down I do wish I could use it without the big cable attached, but hey. The price of around 450 quid, MOTU's Knob of Eternity is not cheap, but it's very capable, and it's a beautiful bit of kit.
MOTU's Track 16. There you go. Really liking the knobs, the feel, the buttons, the LEDs. You know, it's all good. It's a premium interface. It's highly priced, but you know, really good quality. The cable everybody talks about is, yeah, it's long and unwieldy, but I think once you're wired in, once you've tied it all down, then you know that works and leaves you with a really nice desktop unit to play with. I love the iPad control. I think that's, you know, better, much better than expected. The way the CueMix works is excellent. The effects are excellent, and then the whole business with the latency. It does have low latency compared to most. Its performance is average, as so many things are these days, so you know it's neither a plus or a minus really. It does the same as most audio interfaces, but having those couple of extra milliseconds latency is a really useful thing and worth mentioning, definitely. So yeah, long cable, lovely box, the Track 16, or as it should be called, the Mark of the Unicorn Knob of Eternity. Join us again. Cheers. Stay warm.